Shira, I have to start with you because you wrote a column this week and the title was my favorite. Apple's political savviness is an undervalued asset. Explain the political savviness underway at Apple this week.
So this is an ongoing story, but Apple's been very clever about both personal diplomacy with President Trump and President Xi in China, that you've seen Donald Trump say repeatedly that Tim Cook is someone that he trusts, and then he can pick up the phone and call Tim Cook. And to Apple's credit, that gives the company's views kind of a fair airing in the White House. And Cook is also the kind of person, and Apple's the kind of company that they've been smart about kind of rebranding money that it already spends on things like data centers and on parts for its devices, and basically coming up with a very large number and touting that as Apple's contribution to the U.S. economy. And again, for somebody like President Trump, who likes to talk about his contribution to the U.S. economy and his efforts to bring manufacturing, bring a manufacturing revival in the United States, those words from Apple are music to the president's ears.
Gene, we saw the Apple PR marketing machine underway this week. Austin's a no-name factory, if you will. I mean, a few Mac Pros, but we're not talking about building the iPhone at that factory. And yet he's gotten in President Trump's seemingly good graces. Do you see that as an undervalued asset when you take a look at Apple?
Absolutely, and just to put some context to that, we're talking about 1% of Apple's business is this Mac Pro, this high-end computer, and so yes, it's an undervalued asset. When we think about this relationship, it is a relationship that both benefit from. It's very clear to look at how Apple benefits from these some of these exclusions from tariffs, and not only that, but as we go forward, I think being in the good graces of the administration should help with future tariffs, as you've outlined, and even next year, however that plays out. I think that the separate piece on that is this helps Trump obviously as well, just building his brand around what is globally respected, one of the most respected companies globally. And so I think Tim Cook, if we rewind the last decade, is that he came in being really known as being an operator, and now he's, I think, become a statesman. And I think that there's two other phases to Tim as the next, I think, as an innovator, and I think he will ultimately get credit for that. One last piece, slightly off topic, but important about Tim Cook, is that an aspect that largely gets overlooked, he stays out of trouble. And as simple as that, if you look at other tech executives, I think it is part of his underappreciated, potentially the world's greatest CEO.
Gene, we switch from the operator to the basic fundamentals. Can you remind me of your base case as it relates around tariffs? If there is not an exclusion, how does that change the profitability of Apple?
So as it stands today, there's talk of 10% tariffs coming in December that will impact the majority of their products. U.S. accounts for more or less a third of overall revenue. Taylor, I don't want to give you a specific answer, and part of it is that there are so many layers between that. I think if I throw an answer out there, it would just simply stoke some concern, some fear out there, or may create too much optimism. It's hard to say, but I think this should be the simple takeaway, is that what happened this week would not have happened if it wasn't for the December setup looking good for Apple. And I think ultimately there will be very few or no tariffs levied against Apple in December.